Biden's surrender.
And Joe Biden was still telling us one of the best trained armies in the world, one of the best trained militaries in the world, after the Taliban had the Afghan military army in full collapse and had taken over 60% of the country. How do you get it that wrong when you know it's wrong? Maybe it had something to do with his steep cognitive decline. Joe Biden seems to have a hard time speaking, thinking, walking, and doing any basic function at this point for himself. So his staff of social justice warriors, they seem to be calling the shots. But don't take my word for it. Just look at this other strange moment from Biden earlier today. Take a look.
Now, I'm supposed to stop and walk out of the room here. I'm going to stop, but with your permission, I'm going to walk into the room because I want to say hello to them. Thank you.
And I know we don't call them tornadoes anymore either. It stopped being funny a long time ago. Now hundreds of Americans are held hostage. 13 brave American heroes are dead because of that guy's incompetence. One Gold Star mother invited former President Trump to her son's funeral, not Joe Biden. You have all these 9/11 families saying, don't come to our memorials on 9/11. And this mother says that Joe Biden has blood on his hands. In a social media post, she called Biden a weak human being and a traitor. Joe Biden truly is a weak human being in every way, physically, mentally, morally. And now a vast majority of Americans seem to agree. A new Democratic-leaning YouGov Economist poll has Biden's approval rating now below 40%, with an oversampling of Democrats of 10%. Here with reaction, Donald Trump Jr. Let me start with what would your dad do? First thing I say, they never would have, if they moved 3 steps outside of the borders they agreed to, he would have obliterated them. Like the Caliphate, Soleimani, like Baghdadi, like the al-Qaeda leader in Yemen. That's step one. We never would have gotten here, right?
No. Sean, the only thing these animals respect and understand is strength. And Joe Biden exudes nothing but weakness. Donald Trump exuded strength. So they knew he was not someone to be trifled with. They knew he was not someone to mess with. Donald Trump also had the brain power to actually negotiate like a real businessman, not a bureaucrat politician with no real world experience. He wouldn't have walked away without having conditions met. He wouldn't have given them, I've read, $65 billion in U.S. equipment. He wouldn't have allowed that, and they wouldn't have even thought to mess with him. When I watch the Secretary of State and these other clowns, we're really shocked that the Taliban doesn't have an inclusive and diverse cabinet. I mean, this is a clown show. I mean, my kindergartners would have known this when they were in kindergarten. It is so absurd that this is the stuff that they're pushing. You know, and I guess it explains it because it's the only thing that matters is checking off a lot of boxes. They spent a lot of time bragging about having the most diverse cabinet in the history of America. Look what it's gotten us, because they're actually not hiring competent people. They're checking off boxes arbitrarily, and they're putting in clowns that have no business having American lives, the American economy, in the palm of their hands, because you see exactly what they're doing it. They're destroying it all. The one place I have to be surprised about is Joe Biden is overperforming. I thought it would take him years to destroy America, Sean, and he's been able to do it in a mere few months. It's absolutely ridiculous. Every day, the clown show gets worse and worse. You're seeing now the State Department confirming, well, we're not really letting flights of American citizens get out of there because they want to make the world's largest airlift, where they took out a lot of Afghanis, a lot of people on suspected terror lists, some convicted rapists out of Afghanistan, but they left the citizens of the United States behind. I guess they want to get credit for that, so they're not going to allow other people to do the job they should have been doing for the last 25 days because they're incompetents, Sean.
All right, let me ask you this. I want to read you something, Don, if I can, because this is our State Department. You've heard about all these efforts. We've got special op forces, guys retired, Navy SEALs, guys retired, guys that are watching this, that are sick and tired of watching America retreat and surrender and leaving Americans behind enemy lines. They're risking their lives. Others are putting in a lot of money to charter really expensive planes, and they're sitting on a tarmac for 6-7 days in some cases. And a State Department memo goes out on September 1st. First, no independent charters are allowed to land at a specific air base. The military air base you mentioned in your communication with Samantha Power. In fact, no charters are allowed to land at any Department of Defense base, and most, if not all, countries in the Middle Eastern region, with the exception of perhaps Saudi Arabia, will allow charters to land. Then it says you need to find another destination country. It can't be the United States. And then it says, from our State Department, it may require official approval from the State Department before accepting a private charter flight, which the department, our State Department, will not provide that approval. So we got Americans in chartered planes, Don Jr., in chartered planes, ready to take off, a country willing to accept them, and they're saying, we won't let you come to the U.S., and we won't give you approval to go to the country that will accept you. Are you kidding me?
It's disgusting. American citizens are doing the job that the Biden administration should have been doing from day one, but they see the lack of leadership. They see the incompetence. It's literally like the most Biden thing ever. It's like you spoke about earlier in your monologue with Bo Bergdahl. Let's trade 4 terrorists for a deserter, for a traitor. That's like the most Obama-Biden Democrat trade ever. This is the next iteration of that. It's the continuation of Joe Biden's America Last policy.
All right, Donald Trump Jr., thank you. Appreciate you being with us. Tonight, while the Biden administration complains about the lack of inclusion in the Taliban's new government, we're getting a picture of what life will be like under the Taliban rule, where Sharia law rules supreme. Now, Afghan women will soon be banned from playing sports, holding most jobs. Their travel will also be restricted. Most music is also going to be banned. Comedy is banned. And all women will be forced to adhere to a strict dress code and moral code. The punishment for breaking any of these barbaric rules is death. Here with more, the host of Fox Nation, Lara Logan, along with the Medal of Honor recipient, Fox News contributor Dakota Meyer is with us. Dakota, I want to ask you, my understanding is that our intelligence was able to track the terrorist attack that killed 13 Americans and injured 200 more and killed, over 100 more. And they ran up the chain. They tracked him. They knew what was happening. The intel was exactly right. And that they had the ability to take this guy out. Now, Jennifer Griffin says the Pentagon denies this report. And they didn't take out the suicide bomber. You've been looking into it. I heard you this morning talking about it. What's the latest on it? Is the Department of Defense telling us the truth, or are they lying?
Yeah, I mean, look, Sean, are we going to trust the Department of Defense? Are we going to actually trust the people who are part of the Biden administration that continue to lie to us? No. I mean, look, we are talking to the people on the ground. We have confirmed with 3 different sources that were involved in this, that sent it up. They had intel reporting that there was going to be an attack. They found this person. They actually had drone lock on this person. They sent it up and requested to take the shot. And the response was back no, for the reason being that they were negotiating with in negotiations with the Taliban. Now, this is coming directly from sources who were on the ground, the sources who were actually involved in this incident. So, I mean, of course, do you expect the government to go ahead and take accountability? Because that's what it would happen if they actually admitted to this.
All right, let me go to you, Lara Logan. We know what life was like for women under the Taliban before. We see these reports. We know what they're saying that they're going to do. I guess the obvious question is, why would anyone expect anything different? And the idea that Tony Blinken is so out of touch with who the Taliban really is, and they force young girls into sex slavery and marriage and subjugate women in ways where they can't go to school or work, and the fact that they don't know that, and the fact that he's saying, well, we're concerned about the lack of inclusivity with the new government of the Taliban, how dumb are these people not to know the Taliban for who they are?
It's not stupidity, Sean. They know exactly who the Taliban are. They're counting on the fact that American people don't know who the Taliban are to sell you a pack of lies. And this didn't start with Tony Blinken. This started with the Obama administration. You can go all the way back to right after Obama was elected. This was the message from the very, very beginning, that there's good Taliban and bad Taliban. They packed the administration with Taliban apologists, and they have just ignored all the evidence. The Taliban has had control over limited parts of Afghanistan, and their rule in those areas for the last few years has been identical to what you're seeing now. So it's not just a question of they didn't know. They had all the evidence. I've received today footage of young women at protests, which I think are in Kabul. I'm going to be releasing that when I have been able to vet it and know for sure. But there's gunfire breaks out. These women are screaming and terrified. I have another photograph from Reuters of a Taliban fighter pointing an M16 American-made rifle, probably courtesy of the U.S. military, at a woman, and then another picture of her body. And I'm trying to vet and confirm that. But there's women protesting all over Afghanistan now who are being shot at. There's been a number of policewomen executed, as you mentioned. And the Biden administration has all of the evidence that they need. They had it before. And what they're doing is just lying to you. And you know, Sean, you remember Schindler's List, right? We all know what Schindler's List is. Well, I just, you talked about the special operations vets, and the Biden State Department and the Justice Department and the agency are working overtime to threaten and intimidate all of those vets. They're using every lever of their power to shut down those rescue operations, to drag them out. And they're now encouraging people to go to Kabul. That's the message that's going out on these networks. And I'm on a lot of these ops rooms. I am one of the people that is trying to help rescue Afghans. And I'm telling everybody that before they slap some phony kind of charges on everybody and try and imprison people for trying to rescue people, the same way that they've got people in prison for going to the Capitol on January 6th, right? And I want to tell you what they've actually been doing. They have ceded control to the Taliban, and they have sent out to their active duty forces to let them know that all of those manifests will be vetted by Siraj Haqqani. This man has a $5 million bounty on his head. He's one of the most wanted terrorists in the world. That's by the U.S., right? The U.S. designated him a terrorist. There are Americans who died and have been wounded going after Siraj Haqqani and the Haqqani network. There are tens of thousands of Afghans who have been killed by Siraj Haqqani. And now he's in charge of security. He's the man that they went to before the U.S. Forces were bombed at that airport. He's the guy that they turned to for help, a known terrorist. This is who the American people are being told is going to be our counterterrorism partner. This is the cabinet that where Tony Blinken says there's some people there with, questionable kind of issues, right, in their past. Excuse me? You're a designated terrorist by the United States government. And this administration has been breaking the law over and over again. They're now going to take humanitarian aid, which is your tax dollars, the tax dollars of soldiers' families who've died on that battlefield, and the families of 9/11, and they're going to try to pass it to the Taliban. You know why, Sean? Because we were sending a pallet of cash every week to the Afghan government, and the Taliban can't function without it. They want that money, right? And the Biden administration wants to give it to them, but they're looking for a way to get it there. And they've got a little problem here, because they were going to make recognition of the Taliban government, they were going to make that conditional based on their actions, right? But look at their actions. They're going house to house executing people, right? There's a genocide or potential genocide in the making in the Panjshir Valley. The people we were fighting with a few weeks ago, our allies, are being slaughtered by the Pakistanis, and the U.S. is doing nothing. Someone in Congress needs to ask, what are we doing about Pakistan? Why are we not sanctioning and stopping Pakistan? Do we believe in governing by fear and terror, or do we believe in democracy and freedom?
Great report. Thank you, Lara Logan. Thank you. When we come back, a new report shedding light on why Biden staffers are quick to cut his mic off. We'll explain. We'll get reaction. Rick Grinnell, Dana Lash. We got a busy news night straight ahead. Stay with us.
18 Trump appointees serving on U.S. military academy boards. Those ousted include high-profile Trump administration officials, including former White House counselor Kellyanne Conway, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. As always, when news breaks out, we'll break in. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to Hannity.
Now, Joe Biden's struggles are so glaring and so undeniable that even his own staff, they're putting him on mute, literally. Because according to a new report from Politico, White House staffers often put the president on silent or don't watch him live at all in an effort to quell their anxiety about what he might say or might do. Of course, this report already tells us what we know, and that is that Biden's presidency is imploding, and it's also why Biden is told, don't take questions altogether, because he's weak, he's frail, he's a cognitive mess, and frankly, deteriorating daily. And common sense Americans, the world, they've all taken notice. Listen to the welcome that Joe Biden got yesterday in New Jersey that the media tended to ignore.
This time, leave them in ruins and leave Americans behind. Leave Americans behind. He will leave you behind. You guys, protecting him. He'll leave you guys behind.
That's great.
Ronald Wildrick buried in Arlington, 2011, December 11th. For what? He lost his life for what?
And meanwhile, Biden's failures abroad continue to embolden America's enemies and adversaries. Because get this, according to a new report, U.S. News will report China is now weighing new ways to embarrass the Biden administration, including occupying the bought, paid for, built, abandoned U.S. Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. Just like we've been telling you, Biden not only surrendered to the Taliban, not only emboldened terrorists, but created a power vacuum that will be filled by the likes of Russia, China, Iran, all hostile regimes. And we are now weaker, and the world worries because of Joe Biden's self-inflicted and preventable disaster. Here with reaction, former acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell, along with radio host Dana Lash. Good to see you both. Rick, let me start with you. From the standpoint, I will tell you, every single military person I know, and I know a lot of them, they are apoplectic. And those that were severely injured and those that have family members that were lost, they are apoplectic. And the most shocking thing is they can't believe we left Americans behind enemy lines with the Taliban, holding them hostage and living at their whim.
They should be furious, and you know who else is really upset? Our State Department employees. They were left behind. Intelligence officers. Look, Sean, I think what's clear is that the Biden doctrine is leave 10% behind. And it's atrocious. It's embarrassing. I can tell you that career intelligence officials, career State Department officials are horrified. They don't know what's next. They don't know if they're going to be left. And now what we hear is excuses from the White House that somehow these people didn't want to get out of Afghanistan. I mean, come on. This is really bad.
Let me get your position, Dana. You also talk to a lot of people in the military. You're well connected. You know about efforts that we will one day be able to tell the American people is going on right now to save American lives behind enemy lines with no help from the State Department. But the reality is, this is what they did. They own this, and it was all preventable.
No, I think you're exactly right, Sean. And I'm also really confused about Blinken's statements from earlier today where he said that, oh, no, it's the Taliban that's preventing these planes from taking off. And then there was concerns that, well, we don't know where we're going to bring these people, the ones that were actually able to get to the airport. His statement made no sense considering the fact that all of these planes have been diverted to third-party neutral countries, whether it's Albania, whether it's Qatar, et cetera, where these people's documentation can be gone over to make sure that they're not a threat to the United States before they're actually brought into the United States. So once again, we have the federal government that's not making any sense, and it's not being straight with the American people. And Sean, this is why, furthermore, you know why people are muting Joe Biden? Joe Biden can't talk about any of this. It's a walking cringe fest. Everybody's going to be paying attention coming up here at midterm elections. Barack Obama said in 2010, after midterm elections, that Democrats were delivered a shellacking. I mean, this might be too far of reach for this reference, but it's going to be a Waffle House level beat down coming up at these midterm elections because of everything this administration has done, particularly as it relates to the FUBARD disaster that's in Afghanistan.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Rick Grinnell. When we come back, a man who was freed by a bail fund promoted by Kamala Harris has now been charged with murder. Great job. Also today, Larry Elder in his campaign, had eggs thrown at them, and hostility broke out just while walking through Los Angeles. We've got the tape. Leo 2.0 Terrell, Greg Jarrett, they react. Agenda is on full display tonight because, get this, remember last summer, Kamala Harris promoting the Minnesota Bail Fund to bail out rioters amid violent unrest? Well, a Minnesota man who was freed by that Harris-supported far-left radical bail group is now being charged with murder. 47-year-old George Howard reportedly became involved in a road rage incident late last month in Minneapolis and allegedly shot dead a fellow driver. He's been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Ask yourself, where is the outrage from Democrats for the crime crisis their agenda is enabling all across the country? You know, defund, dismantle, no bail laws. What about violence against police officers and other innocent Americans? Because earlier today in Los Angeles, look at, for example, Larry Elder. He's out campaigning, attacked by a bunch of egg-throwing radical leftist agitators, and a fight nearly breaks out. Take a look. More reaction. Fox News contributor Leo 2.0 Terrell, along with Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. You know, Leo, let me start with you. When January 6th happened, we all condemned it, all 3 of us. That can't happen in our country. We got to protect our institutions, our elected officials. It's not about political disagreement. Got to protect them. But we also had a summer of rioting that was completely ignored by Democrats. We had police precincts burned to the ground, nearly 3,000 officers injured, pelted with rocks and bricks and frozen water bottles, a couple of dozen people injured, 3,000 cops hurt. Where's that commission? Hundreds of riots around the country.
You won't see that commission, Sean, because that commission would basically indict the Democratic Party. That's leftist chaos, what you just saw. And that tape of Larry Elder, which you just showed, that we just showed to the viewers, first time I've seen it, it's disgusting. Kamala Harris funded a Minnesota Freedom Fund where the rioters burned down a police department. There has been no action whatsoever for the summer of riots, summer of criminals, summer of misconduct. The Democrats will ignore that because that's their base. That is their Democratic base. And what you just saw with Larry Elder is the Democratic fear that you have people of color leaving the Democratic Party. Larry Elder, a black Republican, telling other people of color to go to the right side, to the Republican side. And they don't want it because if you take the black and the brown vote away from the Democratic Party, you don't have a Democratic Party at all. And that's what they fear. That's what's happening in Los Angeles. And what you saw with Kamala Harris, in my opinion, a benefit for Larry Elder to campaign because she is a total disaster.
All right, you know, let me ask you, Greg Jarrett. I don't like to see violence anywhere. We saw what happened last summer. Joe Biden never even mentioned it at his DNC convention speech. The reality is all these people were murdered. Police precincts burned to the ground. I had the interview with Horace Lorenzo Anderson Sr., who lost his son, namesake, Jr., and, you know, in the Chop Chaz Summer of Love autonomous zone. Nobody says a word, and they continue with this defunding, dismantle, and no bail law agenda. Now, I would argue that Kamala Harris is aiding and abetting, and those defunding the police are aiding and abetting a lot of the crime we see in big cities all across the country. Where's that commission?
Well, one can argue, Sean, that but for Kamala Harris, Luis Ortiz would be alive today. She didn't pull the trigger, but she championed the bail fund that set the man free who did pull the trigger. I wonder what Kamala Harris would say to Mr. Ortiz's grief-stricken, heartbroken family members, but she refuses to talk about it, a trick she learned from Joe Biden. But this is Kamala Harris's idea of being woke. Let's help the accused criminals. Let's victimize innocent individuals. This accused murderer that her fund helped set free, put back on the streets, was already behind bars for domestic abuse, one of 7 different men accused of beating women that Kamala Harris helped set free. And that's not all. This will shock you. Here are some of the other criminals that Harris's fund put back on the streets. A registered sex offender accused of raping an 8-year-old girl, a twice convicted rapist charged with sexual assault and kidnapping. and a defendant charged with stabbing a friend to death for refusing sex. Now, I could just hear Kamala Harris say, well, that $35 million I helped raise for the bail fund, I just wanted that to go to the good protesters in last year's Summer of Love. Let's remember what they were charged with. As you point out, Sean, looting, arson, destruction of property, assault and battery, setting police cars on fire, vandalism of all kinds. So many innocent people were victimized. But Vice President Harris obviously supports accused criminals over police, law breakers over law abiders, and we're all in America worse for it.
Oh, well said, both of you. All right, I appreciate it. All right, welcome to Hannity. Busy breaking news night. Disturbing news from Afghanistan. 4 dangerous Gitmo detainees released by Obama and Biden in 2014. They have now been appointed to key positions in the new Islamic emirate known as Afghanistan. Great job, Joe and Barack. They joined several other notable terrorists at the top of the Taliban's new government. Now these radical Islamists are holding our fellow Americans hostage, blocking them from leaving the country, sending death squads door to door, hunting for anyone that helped America, that has Western ties in the last 20 years. But tonight, the Biden administration, they are more concerned with the Taliban's lack of inclusivity. I wish I was kidding, but I am not. It's day 25. Americans abandoned behind enemy lines and held hostage.
With regard to the composition of this government or interim government, it includes people who have very challenging track records.
Allowing the Taliban to pick its most wanted, its top draft picks out of Guantanamo to now see them in charge of what is quickly becoming a terrorist superstate is just a slap in the face.
So I guess we shouldn't be surprised when now terrorists, people who have been let go and everything else, are running the very organization that this State Department and this administration is trying to negotiate with. It makes absolutely no sense.
Every time I don't think this situation can get any worse, it does.
Americans held hostage, abandoned behind enemy lines. Day 25.
25 days, Americans held hostage, abandoned behind enemy lines. Let me say this one more time. All of this could have been prevented easily. From April to May, from May to June to July to August, we had months to withdraw all of our people. We had a duty to halt. We saw the Taliban advancing. We could have easily maintained control of Bagram Air Base. We could have aggressively bombed the Taliban with drones, and we could have expedited the withdrawal of Americans and their families, and also our Afghan allies, and the billions of dollars worth of military equipment while we had full control. Biden was warned daily by the intel community about the deteriorating situation. He chose to lie to this country, lie to all of us about the well-trained Afghan military. They were all getting their asses kicked, and the entire world was watching. And, of course, he encouraged Afghanistan's president, the one that abandoned the country with a lot of money, to lie to the world. And now the fate of our fellow Americans rests in the hands of terrorists, including Islamists, once imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay, freed in exchange for a former Army deserter by Biden and Obama. In 2015, during his announcement speech, then candidate Trump predicted that this burglary, just like years earlier, he predicted Osama bin Laden is a bad guy. That wasn't going to end well. Take a look.
The people negotiating it don't have a clue. Our president doesn't have a clue. He's a bad negotiator. He's the one that did Bergdahl. We get Bergdahl. They get 5 killer terrorists that everybody wanted over there. We get Bergdahl. We get a traitor. We get a no-good traitor. And they get the 5 people that they wanted for years. And those people are now back on the battlefield trying to kill us.
Donald Trump was right. 2 years later, Bo Bergdahl, he pleaded guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. And now 4 out of the 5 Gitmo detainees who were exchanged for Bergdahl, they are in leadership positions now atop the new Taliban government, which, by the way, will swear themselves in, I believe, on the 20th anniversary of September 11, 2001. And as we first reported last night, these terrorists are blocking private chartered flights from extracting our own American citizens. And according to Biden's own Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, our ability to get those planes in the sky is pretty limited without the control of an airport or boots on the ground. Watch this.
As of now, the Taliban are not permitting the charter flights to depart. They claim that some of the passengers do not have the required documentation. While there are limits to what we can do without personnel on the ground, without an airport, with normal security and procedures in place, we are working to do everything in our power to support those flights and to get them off the ground.
And the State Department said that even if those private chartered planes get permission to land in a country, they can't come to the U.S. That's not an option. How is that possible when we have U.S. citizens on board? But if they get permission, but that permission is predicated on permission from our State Department, the answer will be no. Explain that to me. Biden said we had all the leverage. Where's the leverage, Joe? If only we held on to Bagram or kept forces on the ground or used Predator drones to push back the Taliban, or speeding up the withdrawal until every American was out, every Afghan ally was out, all our military equipment was out. None of that happened, and you had months watching this unfold. And now Blinken seems less concerned with Americans left behind, but he's more concerned with the lack, get this, the lack of diversity and inclusion in the Taliban's new government. When the Taliban was in power the last time, girls couldn't go to school, women couldn't go to work, they were subjugated to men. Young girls were taken as sex slaves and wives by Taliban fighters. Do we think they changed? I doubt it. Take a look.
Yesterday, the Taliban named a new interim government. We're assessing the announcement, but despite professing that a new government would be inclusive, the announced list of names consists exclusively of individuals who are members of the Taliban or their close associates, and no women. It certainly does not meet the test of inclusivity, and it includes people who have very challenging track records.
A stunning lack of inclusivity from a terrorist organization that we already know enslaves women, subjugates women, and forces young girls against their will to marry Taliban fighters, and they murder musicians and artists and anybody they don't like. Does that make sense? These are terrorists, Mr. Blinken. How stupid are you? They're whipping women and children with wires at the airport. They're hunting down female Afghan police officers. They're murdering them right in the street. You see the reports. You know the truth. They helped plan the 9/11 terrorist attacks that took out nearly 3,000 Americans, 2,977, if my memory serves me correctly. The Biden administration is worried over the lack of gender diversity in the Taliban's new government. Are you really that ignorant? Sadly, it appears the answer is yes. A brand new ad from Trump's Save America PAC highlights the insane level of incompetence, really just touches the surface. Take a look.
How did President Biden get this so wrong?
They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place.
This has been a disaster.
The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army.
It looks like Saigon 2.0 to me.
The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
This tragedy was completely preventable.
We told you Joe Biden was not up to the job. Now we're seeing the devastating consequences of his incompetence. Biden vacationed while Afghanistan collapsed. American military equipment was plundered. And now America weeps over the lives sacrificed.